What's up, Bama Insider Nation? This is Alabama Crimson Tide Recruiting on BamaInsider.com. Trey Hannity here, joined by the expert in the industry, 15-year veteran, best-selling author, Andrew Bone. Guys, you can find him on Twitter at AndrewJBone. We have a lot to talk about today. Class 2023, some visits, of course. National Signing Day coming up. But before we do that, guys, hit the like button. Help our channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe to that channel. Leave a comment. We can't see your comments live during this show, but we still want you to get in there and let us know what you think about signing day coming up, this 2023 class. And guys, go to BamaInsider.com. We got big boards coming out on there, a lot of other content in our forums and everything else, so be sure to check that stuff out. But Bone, as we get into the show tonight, how was your last week? What are your thoughts as these visits continue to come and National Signing Day now approaches?
Yeah, I mean, we felt like it was going to be a pretty quiet signing day for Alabama, but it looks like, we were at least watching a few announcements. Danny Lewis Jr., who visited Alabama this past weekend after receiving an offer from Alabama last week, took his official visit with Tide, and I think we're going to be watching him pretty closely come next Wednesday after he has taken an official visit to LSU. He's expected down at Florida this weekend. Talk a little bit more about him in a minute. You also have a new offer today, actually. Jalen Farmer, a three-star offensive guard from the state of Georgia. Been committed to Florida for a while, but just picked up that offer from Alabama. We haven't been able to confirm just yet. Now, keep in mind, this show is recorded, so filming a little bit earlier in the day, so maybe a little bit later on this evening we're going to be able to confirm if he's going to make a trip to Tuscaloosa this weekend. But I think Alabama pretty much doesn't. They're not going to extend an offer to a player this late in the process if they don't think that player will at least come in for an official visit. Kind of like what they did with Danny Lewis last week. Offered him on Tuesday. He set up the official visit, the following day. And so now I think with Jalen Farmer getting this offer today, I'd be surprised if we didn't see him make a trip to Tuscaloosa this weekend. We'll kind of see what happens there. And we've talked about this for a while. We said, Alabama is still kind of in the mix for, or at least considering taking another tight end, still looking around for another offensive lineman. Now, he also said that, maybe they wait and do this in the transfer portal. Maybe they take somebody there. But, I don't think anybody's really popped in just yet. There might be some players that jump in that portal after the spring. But after, as of right now, I think most of the guys that they're, really focused on are these last two guys in high school that they've offered over the course of the last week and a half. So we'll see kind of what happens.
Yeah, certainly will. Less than a week away now, National Signing Day, of course, next Wednesday. You talked about Danny Lewis there for a second. What can you gather after his official visit to Tuscaloosa? What are your thoughts on how he feels this late in the process and kind of a forecast for his decision?
Well, he's one of these quiet kids. Yeah, he doesn't really do a lot of interviews, keeps to himself pretty regularly. You're not going to see many interviews with him, full of quotes like we see with some kids. But, Danny Lewis had a great visit to Alabama this past weekend. Came over with his family and, really enjoyed it a lot. And I think the biggest thing with him right now is trying to hold off some of these other schools that have been making a big push for him over the course of the last few weeks. He was once committed to Cincinnati. Then LSU extended him an offer, and then Florida extended him an offer. Now he's got a really good relationship with Billy Napier, who coached at Louisiana, who had developed a really good relationship with him over the course of the last few years. He's only about 15 minutes from Lafayette, Louisiana. So the biggest thing right there is making him believe that he's wanted at Alabama. And I think, Alabama really likes him a lot. This is a very athletic tight end, also a, standout basketball player. He measured in at 6'4", 260 pounds when he visited Tuscaloosa this past weekend. So he's definitely somebody that Alabama has very high interest in. The biggest thing now is, can they get him on board with only, really recruiting him for about, 2 weeks. And, sometimes they're able to do that. Sometimes they can't. We saw that last month with Jihad Campbell when he decommitted from Clemson, took that visit to Alabama a couple days later, and then bam, on, during that early signing period, signed with Alabama. So we'll kind of see what happens with Danny Lewis, but I certainly think that Alabama has a very realistic chance with this recruit from Louisiana.
Yeah, hey, better late than never. Alabama would certainly love to add another tight end. Here in the last little bit of this National Signing Day for this 2022 class, we talked about 2022 guys. Past weekend, though, the majority of visits came from 2023 guys. A lot of in-state guys. Peter Woods, Quay Rousseau, some of the names. Kelby Collins, James Smith, and Tamarion Parker as well. Some of the guys in town. What did you gather from these visits and kind of how these in-state guys feel as we start to turn the page to this 2023 class?
Yeah, what we've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks, from last weekend and now this weekend, going into Junior Day, these visits are, there's not a lot of recruits there, and that's kind of how Alabama likes it. They don't really try to blow it out like, oh wow, Alabama's having this big extravagant Junior Day. You don't get a lot of you don't get a lot of face time with Nick Saban when you have 150, 200 recruits on campus. So you try to keep it, it's pretty small. You invite kids that you feel like you have a lot of interest in. A lot of those guys have offers already. Some guys end up getting offers from the Crimson Tide during these weekend visits. But what we saw last weekend was the majority of recruits who were in town were all in-state guys, guys that are in that 2023 class. Now we did see a few 2024 recruits in town, but let's talk about the 2023 guys. You had Peter Woods, who everybody just assumes he's going to Alabama, but he's not committed yet. He's kept things pretty tight-lipped as far as when he's going to make a decision. He says he's going to enjoy the process, take some visits. I think that a lot of schools are very high on his list, but Alabama certainly, in my opinion, is in the driver's seat still for him. I think they've got a great chance to land him as an Alabama fan. Admits growing up a huge Alabama fan and an Alabama family. Been to Tuscaloosa several times. And also, a couple of his teammates just signed with Alabama back in December, and Traquan Fagans and Jeremiah Alexander, who he spent a lot of time with during the visit to Alabama this past weekend. He also had James Smith and Tamarion Parker out of Carver High School in Montgomery, both top dogs in the state. I mean, these are two very elite guys, both in the Rivals 100. Quay Rousseau really has blown up since his really since the early part of his junior season. A lot of offers came through. Had a great junior season. Had a lot of sacks. I think he ended up with 15 or 16 sacks during the season, and certainly a guy that Alabama sees as an inside or outside linebacker. I mean, Alabama talked to him about playing inside, but also said he's got that athletic ability to play on the outside as well. So, I think he really likes Alabama a lot. Even though he grew up an Auburn fan, he has very high interest in the Crimson Tide. And then you had his teammate James Smith, who just recently moved back. Attended ING Academy during his junior season, has moved back to Montgomery, training with the guys over at Madhouse Training. So shout out to those guys. And those are the same guys who trained Curtis Perry last year. They also, they work with so many top recruits in the Montgomery area, and worked with a lot of guys that have played at Alabama, including Sean Dion Hamilton and Mac Wilson. So, those guys are going to get these guys from Montgomery right. So, those are two big guys that were in Tuscaloosa. You also had Tamarion Parker, who's out of Central High School in Phoenix City. And this is a really intriguing prospect because he's 6'4", about 235 pounds. Says he's being recruited mainly as a defensive end by pretty much all the schools that are coming after him. Says that Alabama, Georgia are his top two schools. Also has very high interest in Ohio State, who just recently offered him a couple weeks ago. So, somebody that we're watching pretty closely, and so definitely somebody that I think Alabama has a lot of interest in. They extended him an offer back during the season. It was about October when they extended him an offer, and he made a trip to Tuscaloosa shortly after. It was his first visit to Alabama. So this was his second visit to Alabama this past weekend. So I know he had a really good time. We have interviews with all those guys on BamaInsider.com, so you can go check those interviews out. And then we saw, like I mentioned, there were some new offers that got extended. We saw some in that 2024 recruiting class, which when I see an offer get extended and to a guy who's a sophomore, I think you still want to see that guy a little bit more. You want to see them in camp, during the summer, make sure you're making the right decision. All right. Is he going to play offense? Is he going to play defense? Is he a corner? Is he a safety? Is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? You gotta work these guys out. Make sure you're, recruiting them for the right position. And it's somebody that, you feel like, is a top guy. It plays at a high level at that position once you evaluate all the guys in that recruiting class. So let's focus mainly on the 2023 guys who were offered. One was Hunter Osborne, defensive end from Hewitt-Trussville. This is a guy who has 40 plus scholarship offers, and he's been waiting on that offer from Alabama for a long time. He grew up an Alabama fan, been to Tuscaloosa several times. Definitely somebody that Alabama has a lot of interest in. It's going to be interesting kind of see what happens on the defensive front for Alabama, because this is a big need this year in this year's class. Really probably going after 6, maybe even 7 defensive linemen in this 2023 group. They only signed 3 last year, so how many do you go after this year? Do you potentially look in the portal after next season for maybe another guy? Do you only sign 6 and go after 1 in the portal? I think that's certainly some options that Alabama has on the table, and there's a lot of guys out there. We've talked about a lot of guys that are also in state at the defensive end position, whether that was Peter Woods or Tamarion Parker. We didn't also need to mention Kelby Collins, who is also in Tuscaloosa, who's a priority target for Alabama and has Alabama very high on his list. So a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of guys in state that are very talented, but also some top out of state guys that they're going after as well. But Hunter Osborne gets that offer from Alabama, and I'm sure that they're going to start amping up their recruiting efforts in him. And then another in-state guy that we saw receive an offer on Saturday was Wilkin Fromby out of Northridge High School in Tuscaloosa. Big kid. I mean, this is a guy who measured. He didn't say he's 6'8". He was measured at 6'8". Sometimes you see these kids end up saying, "Yeah, I'm 6'8", 315 pounds," and you get their you get an accurate height and weight on them. They're 6'5", 360. But this is a guy who measured in right at 6'8". Right at about 305 pounds. So he's got a lot of good size. And I had a chance to talk to his high school head coach, Mike Vickery, the other day, who was on the staff when Daphne won the state championship with TJ Yeldon and Ryan Anderson and those guys. And he really had a lot of good things to say about Wilkin. And this is certainly a guy who grew up an Alabama fan, but he's not saying that. He's coming out saying, I'm interested in both in-state schools. Both in-state schools have offered him, so he wants to try to be even kill on his recruiting journey right now and enjoy that process. But definitely somebody that, in my opinion, can commit to Alabama if he wants to right now. He doesn't have to wait until this wasn't a contingent offer on coming to camp or getting seen during the spring. This is an offer that if he wants to jump on board, he can jump on board. I think his stock's going to only rise throughout the spring. So those are 2 guys that we're going to keep an eye on as far as new offers are concerned. Alabama's going to have a junior day this weekend, where I think that we'll probably see some more offers get extended to some underclassmen.
Yeah, no doubt. Going to be a big weekend. This past one, of course, a big weekend as well. And for the guys you mentioned, like Wilkin Formby, you hope they enjoy this process. I'm with you. I think, it's 6'8", 300 plus. Your stock is only going to continue to increase. And his coach, Mike Vickery, with an all-time Twitter name at Coach Mike Vick. So glad he took advantage of the namesake there. But, some more big news coming this week is an updated rankings on Rivals.com, as Alabama has moved to number 1 ahead of Texas A&M and ahead of the Georgia Bulldogs. A few tied commitments were upgraded to 5 stars this week, which, of course, boosted them that number 1 spot. Elijah Pritchett, Jihad Campbell, and Aaron Anderson included on that list. Were there any surprises that these guys got that 5-star rating? And your thoughts now that Alabama has vaulted to number 1, now just a week away from National Signing Day? Can they hold on to that number 1 ranking?
Yeah, it's crazy. A month ago, everybody was talking about this Texas A&M recruiting class and how it was, one of the best all time. And now Alabama has moved ahead of the Aggies. Some of that had to do with Alabama's, some of their recruits getting upgraded after getting seen at these All-American games. Harold Perkins, who's a 5-star linebacker, decommitted from the Aggies earlier this week. So that pushed them down a little bit. So that gave Alabama an opportunity to move ahead. So, we'll see kind of what happens over the course of the next week and see if Alabama can hang on to that number 1 spot. Obviously, Texas A&M, Georgia still recruiting some guys. Ohio State still recruiting some guys, but they're not going to move ahead of Alabama, A&M, or Georgia. it's going to be one of those three schools that's going to finish number one. And currently, Alabama's sitting in that top spot, highest star average in the country, which is significant at 4.04. And I certainly think that Alabama could, like I said, still could add somebody, make it add Danny Lewis, make it add Jalen Farmer if he decides to make a visit to Alabama. I don't think that's really going to change Alabama's ranking too much because they only count the top 20 recruits in the recruiting class as far as the rankings are concerned. But yeah, I'm not really surprised by some of the guys who were upgraded to 5 stars. I mean, Jihad Campbell was awesome during his Under Armour All-America game. Whether that was during the game or during practice throughout the week, you just constantly heard, he was one of those alpha dogs that was out there on the practice field throughout the week. He just had a great performance. Elijah Pritchett moves up to a 5-star. Number one offensive tackle in the country. I think that you look at whatever site you look at, I think a lot of people agree with Rivals, and we saw him move up to 5 stars on some other sites as well. And then you had Aaron Anderson. I actually think Anderson is a 5-star on Rivals and nowhere else. So Rivals was really high on him based on his performance down in Orlando at the Under Armour All-American game. Was basically just uncoverable throughout the entire week of practice. Had a big catch in the game. This is a guy that has been compared a little bit to some of the national recruiting analysts as a Jalen Waddle type player. Those type of players don't come around every often, so I'm not going to say that he's Jalen Waddle just yet. Let's see him and see how he performs at Alabama. But this is a special player and definitely one of the guys that I feel like can make an impact early on in his career at Alabama. You look at Alabama's commitment list, there's 20 of their 24 signees that are in the Rivals 250. You have 14 in the Rivals 100, which is obviously outstanding. You have some guys that, I remember last summer, Alabama fans were questioning why is it, Alabama recruiting Kelby Prentice when he didn't have any offer, really didn't have any major offers, or Amari Neblack who didn't have any major offers. And then you finally got a chance, people got a chance to finally see them, and everybody was just blown away. I think Amari Neblack could have easily been a 5-star if he would have just been seen a little bit more, or if Kelby Prentice would have gotten an invite to an All-American game. A lot of these All-American games, they invite recruits so early, let's say when these kids are sophomores or, right after their junior season, when, they look at, the early rankings and the guys that have 25 plus offers, and they're all trying to get these guys to commit to their All-American game. Sometimes when kids don't blow up until the summer, if they don't get seen or evaluated until June or July, a lot of these Under Armour or All-American Bowl rosters, they're already full. So they can't get invited. They don't get invited. Some of them might. You can squeeze in 1 or 2 more guys, but you're going kind of throughout the entire country trying to find 1 or 2 more guys to put in the game, and because most of those spots are already full. So I think if Kelby Prentice or Amari Neblack could have been invited or received offers earlier in the process and gotten their early ranking when they were, just juniors into the top 100, they would have been easily invited to these games. But because of, because they weren't seen during the summer, they didn't get invited. And I think that those guys could have easily made a strong case. Or Ty Simpson, you look at Ty Simpson, and some sites have Ty as a 5-star. Rivals has him number 34 overall. If anybody's complaining about number 34 overall, it's just stupid, because that's a pretty daggone good ranking. The thing with Ty is, if he would have gone to an All-American game rather than going straight to Alabama, maybe he would have been a 5-star on Rivals. But you know what, I've said this since the summer. I consider Ty Simpson a 5-star. He's a 5-star mostly everywhere else, so I'm going to consider Ty Simpson a 5-star. So they got the number 1 recruiting class in the country right now. Can they hang on to it all the way until signing day? I think they've got a really good shot to do that, but we got to wait and see what happens with some of these other recruiting classes and some of these other recruits who are making decisions over the course of the next, 5 days.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like you said, Ty Simpson, I'm with you too. I'm going to give him the 5-star here on a recruiting show, at least. Just watch him play. Watch a lot of these kids play. And you hear so much about how stars don't mean anything. And, some of these stars are bogus. Interesting process, but, really good to see guys like Jihad Campbell, Elijah Pritchett getting to that 5th star and, helping out the class get to number 1 here. We touched on it just a second ago. And guys, as we continue talking about this National Signing Day for 2022 and get into this 2023 class, keep hitting that like button. Let us know what you think about some of these recruits that are coming in this 2023 class. Maybe some guys you expect Alabama to sign here at the last minute as we close it out in this final week of the 2022 cycle. But Alabama will have another junior day, like you said, this upcoming weekend. The majority of recruits are coming from out of state, though. Let's talk about some of these key names to follow. Do you expect Alabama extending any other offers following this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly another great weekend for Alabama to bring in recruits. And like I said earlier, they're trying to keep these junior days small. So you're going to see, under 40 recruits that are going to be on campus this weekend. The majority, like you said, majority of these guys are out-of-state recruits. We saw a lot of the in-state recruits visit last weekend. So this weekend is a lot of out-of-state guys, especially guys that are really guys that are in that 5-6 hour radius that they can get to Tuscaloosa pretty easily. Alabama's going to have another junior day, I think March the 5th. That's where we're probably going to see a lot of more of the out of region guys come in for visits. So these are mostly guys that are I say local, but they could be from Georgia or Florida or places like that, not just Alabama, Louisiana. Speaking of Louisiana, Alabama's going to have 5-star wide receiver Shelton Sampson in Tuscaloosa this weekend. We know what Alabama did in December in terms of just raiding the state of Louisiana with signing some of the best wide receivers like Kendrick Law and Shaz Preston and Aaron Anderson. Signed the top 3 wide receivers from Louisiana. It's going to be hard to go in there and sign the number 1 wide receiver, the number 2 wide receiver overall in the country in this class. But Shelton Sampson has very high interest in Alabama, likes Alabama a lot, visited Tuscaloosa back during the season, and now he's coming to Tuscaloosa for Junior Day. So big visit for him this weekend. Miles McVay, offensive lineman out of Illinois, is going to be making his trip back to Tuscaloosa, camped at Alabama this summer, had a great time, and he's certainly a big name that's going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. A couple of kids from Florida who are going to be in town include Malik Bryant, who is the number 1 inside linebacker in the country, played at IMG Academy last season, transferred back to Jones High School in Orlando, so he's going to be in town. And Makari Vickers, who is a 4-star defensive back from Tallahassee, played at the same high school as Tamarion Arnold. Tamarion's been recruiting him to Alabama for the last year, so this is a guy who has very high interest. Would not be surprised if he goes ahead and makes a decision this weekend. So a couple guys that I'm probably watching a little closer than the others as far as decisions are concerned. Going to watch Makari Vickers to see if he possibly might go ahead and make a commitment this weekend. Like I said, I think Alabama's in the driver's seat for him. He's going to be hanging out with Tamarion Arnold this weekend, and he's been to Alabama 2 or 3 times. And then the second guy I'm watching is actually an in-state recruit, Jahil Hurley, who was supposed to be in Tuscaloosa last weekend, is actually coming this weekend instead. This is a guy who was supposed to announce a decision last weekend with Alabama in the driver's seat, but decided to hold off. Could he go ahead and make a decision this weekend? He hasn't said he's going to do it, so maybe if he decides, it's going to be a little bit of a surprise. But I won't be surprised if he goes ahead and makes that commitment, because Alabama's in the driver's seat for him. They're looking for that first big commitment in the 2023 class. Thought it might happen last weekend, but now this weekend, it's the weekend before the dead period, where we're going to see a dead period, until March. So I'm sure they would love to go ahead and get that first 2023 guy on board. And like I mentioned earlier, Jalen Farmer, who is a Florida commitment offensive lineman in that 2022 recruiting class, might possibly be in town this weekend. This is recorded a little bit earlier on Thursday, so we'll know a little bit later on if he's going to make a visit to Tuscaloosa. But we'll definitely wait and see if Jalen Farmer, offensive lineman, is committed to Florida from the state of Georgia, makes the trip to Tuscaloosa this weekend. So that's kind of an overall look at some of the top guys that are coming to Alabama's Junior Day on Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. Like Andrew said, we are pre-recording this show, so things can change. And that's why it's important to turn the bell on our YouTube channel, BamaInsider.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media as well, at Bama Insider on Twitter, to stay notified, in the loop with everything kind of changing. This part of the year, not as much football, obviously, but still a ton of headlines to talk about. And as we close it out tonight, your final thoughts. We've talked about this 2023 class throughout the month of January and how Alabama still doesn't have a commitment yet. Do you see that change this weekend? Are there any other guys that maybe we aren't expecting to make that commitment? And just your overall thoughts on these last few weekends as we now approach just 6 days away from National Signing Day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of waiting to see who ends up making the trip to Alabama this weekend. Does Jalen Farmer end up making a trip? Danny Lewis, who was offered last week, after he ends up making a trip to Alabama this past weekend. These are the two guys that we're going to be watching pretty closely over the course of the next 5 days to see what they end up doing on National Signing Day. We weren't really sure we were going to be watching anybody. Thought it was going to be a pretty quiet signing day, but now we're going to be watching these guys. And obviously, 2023, Alabama's just kind of full throttle. We've seen coaches on the road. We've been posting a lot of updates on Bama Insider over the course of the last 2 weeks about all the visits that they've taken from coast to coast, whether that's in California, the Pacific Northwest, the Northeast, South Florida, Texas, or even just here in Alabama. I mean, these coaches have been all over the place. Nick Saban's been trying to meet and greet a lot of high school coaches throughout the last couple of weeks, and certainly been taking a lot of pictures with high school kids who've been running up to him asking for autographs and photos and stuff like that. So I know he's loving it, and I know he's ready to kind of get the ball rolling on this next recruiting class. And like I said, still looking for that first commitment, but could easily happen this weekend.
It certainly could. Nick Saban, I know, loves making these cameo appearances around the country. Really enjoyed watching those basketball highlights from Arch Manning this past weekend as well. But guys, stay in the know. Hit that like button on this video and get in the comments as we close it out tonight. Let us know what you think about this upcoming weekend. Some of these big-time recruits out of the class of 2023. And guys, go to BamaInsider.com to let us know what you're thinking in the forums. Check out the rest of Andrew Bone's content on the website as well. But until next week, guys, my name is Trey Yanity for Andrew Bone. This has been Alabama Crimson Tide football recruiting on BamaInsider.com. Have a great week, everybody. Roll Tide.